if you ever find yourself asking questions like, why can't I be happy? Why am I so angry all the time? Or why do the little things my partner does always upset me so much? Then you better listen in, because my next guest is a coach. She's a shadow coach. Yep, we're going to find out what that is. And she's also a relationship expert. And she addresses these negative emotions with a therapy called shadow coaching. So please welcome Leah Seafor. Leah, I read the first 2 lines of this book that changed your life, and I can see why, because I said to you, I need this book in my life. It says, what are you hiding from yourself? Why do we find ourselves disproportionately angry with the selfishness of a friend, the laziness of a colleague, the arrogance of a family member, or even the rudeness of a stranger? I mean, I find myself in that position right now, yet it feels so external.
Yeah.
And yet I'm the common denominator,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So anyway, we'll go into that, but tell us, what made you get into shadow coaching?
With a lot of transformational work that we do, we always end up coming back to where we started. We can go through stuff, we can transform stuff, but we always come back to the same habits, the same self-defeating inner talk, that same negative critic.
Yes.
And none of the work I was doing was helping me find how to unlock that until I read Debbie's book. So Dark Side of the Light Chasers is looking at the shadow stuff. It's looking at the shadow parts of ourselves that we don't own. It's understanding that we have got character traits and aspects that we hide from people in our lives because we are always afraid of their judgment.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it since we were young.
Yeah.
And her book showed me how to embrace that side of myself, how to engage my shadow, and how to own it so that I wasn't being triggered by people or events outside of myself and giving my reactive power away to those situations.
What are the fundamentals of shadow coaching?
So shadow coaching really is about supporting people to meet themselves again. It's how do you look at your shadow, find these aspects that you have disowned, see that all of them are there to support you and help you in some way, integrate them back into your life, and then you are living in a very wholesome, very conscious way, as opposed to always being triggered and reactive to people and events in your life.
Okay, is it a lot of sort of like Q&A sessions with your client, or is it a lot of introspective work and then coming and, sort of, laying that down and saying, okay, now what do I do to move forward? Just give us some practical tips of how people would implement shadow coaching in their life, or how you would work with your clients.
So obviously it's depending on what's not working for you about your life, and we find the source of that. We then are going to investigate what is it that's triggering your negative behaviors and the stuck cycles and patterns that you're in, where you get into that same repetitive behavior. So we investigate that. Yes, there's internal work. We do different processes to investigate. And once I think you've got the basic tools and understanding of how shadow coaching works, you can keep applying it to your own life. So it's not about having to stay in therapy for the rest of your life, because your shadow will always present itself. There's never an end point. You never know what the next thing is that's going to trigger you.
But you'll be equipped to be able to deal with
absolutely,
that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Why is it so profound when it comes to relationships then?
Oh, relationships. You're never going to experience your shadow as much as you will in a relationship.
How true is that?
You are living with someone 24 hours a day. You are in each other's space. And the thing about the shadow is we carry a huge amount of guilt and shame about that internal stuff. We don't want to own it. We don't want to take responsibility for it. So it's so much easier to project that stuff onto our partner.
Sure.
And because they are there all the time, you can't run and you can't hide. So every little thing about your partner will irritate you simply because it's a mirror for what you are not looking at within yourself. Your husband finishes the milk and doesn't go and replace the milk in the fridge, and you think, oh, you're so insensitive, you're so selfish. Well, where are you being selfish in your own life that you're not looking at? And that selfishness may not play out directly in the relationship. You might be selfish elsewhere. Maybe your child wanted to spend time with you that afternoon and you said, no, I've got work to do, and you were actually looking at Facebook. And that was your sense of selfishness. And now you carry guilt about that because you really should have been playing with your child. But because you're not owning that, you see it in your partner, it triggers your stuff, and that's when the snapping and the fighting and the bickering starts.
It's deeply spiritual. I mean, it's a biblical reference. That when what you find frustrating in others is actually a reflection of what you find in yourself. And I mean other religions as well, and other spiritual philosophies as well. So it really is it's not just a mental thing that you're going through, it's deeply spiritual. Very, very spiritual.
And you asked in the very beginning about, why can't you be happy, and why do you find yourself in situations that are not okay? And we are operating from a lot of fear-based emotion in a lot of our days. So there's healthy fear, but then there's irrational fear. And the irrational fear is your shadow. That is the stories you tell yourself in your head. Those are the things you're making up in your relationship that aren't really there. And when you apply shadow work and techniques to dealing with that fear-based stuff, it reduces that irrational fear. And now you are living in a far more empowered state, and you're just not getting triggered or reactive to what other people are saying or doing. So it's a mental, spiritual, emotional, physical journey, this shadow work. And yes, as much as Debbie wrote this book, and she's obviously not the first person to have really coined the term shadow work. That was Carl Jung.
Yes,
and,
that's true.
His description of the shadow is the person you'd rather not be.
Okay.
So this work has been around for a long time. Debbie just put it into a format in a way that was really digestible and easy to look at.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about the fault in others and the fault in ourselves, but this is the book that we're talking about, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, Reclaiming Your Power, Creativity, Brilliance, and Dreams, and the author is Debbie Ford. We'll put a picture up on our social media as well. Leah, I have a question for you, because I heard this a few weeks ago in a coaching seminar or something related to coaching as well. This person spoke about when dealing with your shadow, this dark side of your life, that you should actually face the sun, face the light, because then your shadow is behind you. It's not in front of you. You're dealing with those things behind you because you're facing the good part of your life. So it's sort of changing your mindset about things. But is this fooling ourselves? Is it not dealing with the realities of life?
Absolutely. There's a phenomenon around what you've just discussed, which is called spiritual bypassing.
Okay.
So spiritual bypassing is convincing yourself that you're doing all the work on your life. Because I meditate every day, and I do my yoga, and I eat healthy, and I do my retreats twice a year. Tick, tick, tick. And don't get me wrong, that stuff is incredibly important. I do it myself. However, when you are still getting triggered, when you are still reactive about stuff, when you're coming back from your yoga class and you're getting frustrated because someone cut you off on the road and your husband's irritating you when you get home because he didn't make dinner, you haven't done the work on the shadow. When you are reactive, your shadow is in control. So people want to convince themselves they're in the light. And for me, this is the fundamental problem with a lot of personal growth stuff that's out there today, is that it's only focusing on the light. And it's not accepting the fact that we are a duality. We are the light and the dark, the yin and the yang. And you can't be in the light pretending the dark doesn't exist, because it'll drag you down there when you least expect it. So you can't, it's not about keeping it behind you, because even that implies, rejection. It's about bringing it right up and going, I am that thing. I am that frustrated person. I can be stupid. I can be ignorant. I can be contemptuous, and owning those parts of yourself instead of pretending you are not that thing.
So where do you draw the line between not taking it on, but understanding that you've done it in the past?
Well, understanding that there was a reason you did it in the past. It served you in that moment. Like I said earlier about the mom saying to their child, can't play with you because I'm busy working, but actually I'm on Facebook. That's selfishness. However, she is exhausted. She has spent a whole day giving to her job and giving to her husband. She needs half an hour for herself to refuel and recharge. So that's where selfishness could serve her and could actually aid her in that moment. And it's understanding where these perceived negative parts of ourselves do bring a gift into our lives. They're there to help us when we need them. So it's not feeling blame or guilt because of them, and it's understanding how to use them instead of just pretending they're not there at all.
So why do we consistently see fault in others, and why is it so difficult then to see fault in ourselves? Although I say that I'm quite a self-critical person, so before you're judging me, I've already judged myself. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose there are two types of people when we talk about this particular area. But generally, why is it a person, a lot of people would say, I feel like I'm repeating myself, and that trend seems to follow them whether they're at work or at home.
So your shadow does keep you in cycles of negative behavior, and does keep you in patterns that are not working. And the more you try and run away, the more it's going to drag you straight back.
Well, it's attached to you. You can't separate yourself from a shadow, right?
And it's running around trying to show you the mirror through using other people as that reflection, So that's how your shadow will present itself to you, is seeing it in your husband, seeing it in your child, seeing it in a frustrating coworker that you just can't get on with. Well, ask yourself, what is it about them that's triggering me? What in their behavior is pushing my button? They are being so, we said selfish. They just won't listen to me. Well, where are you not listening? It's always, that's the easiest hook, is to understand where you're not doing that in your own life. And the problem sometimes is people try and make it a direct connection to that person. but I always listen to you and you're not listening to me. Well, maybe you're not listening to someone elsewhere in your life. It's not necessarily about that person directly. So, other people, they're just annoying you because they represent a characteristic or an aspect within you that you have disowned about yourself.
So what's a tip that you give to couples to help them? Because this is something you develop over time, and you've got to practice it, and you've got to be consistent with it. But what's a good sort of piece of advice that our viewers out there can start implementing immediately, especially for relationships?
Absolutely. So with relationships, the first thing is to become very aware of your triggers, aware of what your partner is saying or doing that is pushing your buttons. Second thing is to question, why is this pushing my buttons? What is it actually bringing up for me? Our shadows in relationship are very much linked to either childhood stuff or previous relationship stuff that we haven't processed. And we very often dump the unresolved stuff of our previous relationships onto the current one that we're with. So it's questioning what is relevant to this versus stuff I'm bringing from somewhere else. The third thing is to confront situations immediately with a partner. And when I say confront, I don't mean that in an aggressive way. I mean a constructive conversation. You have just behaved or said this thing to me that doesn't work for me. And can we talk about how to make it better? How can we talk about solutions moving forward? The thing about having a conversation is you have got to be open to feedback. And this is where people draw the line. People don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to give their partners the space to tell them what's really going on. And their partners, any relationship that I work with, the number one problem is I don't want to tell you the truth because I'm scared of your reaction.
And that's the shadow of the relationship.
Always. So if you really want to shift your relationship and you want to start transforming stuff, you have got to be willing to listen. And it's not going to be easy. And you're going to hear stuff that you don't want to hear. It's hard to take responsibility for what you are doing that is not okay in the relationship, but that is where the transformation really can happen. I see it, I hear it, thank you for feedbacking that to me. Now I can look at stuff within myself. Then you've got to have a conversation about what are we putting in place to make sure this doesn't happen again, or how do we handle it differently the next time around.
So I suppose it's also not taking it as personally, and that's the difficult thing. I suppose dealing with anything in the dark, we've been trained to think that dark is scary. As kids, monsters living in the dark, and so just dealing with your own shadow, that darkness is quite scary. But thanks for shedding some light on it.
Absolute pleasure.
At the end of the day, it was fantastic chatting to you, and we'll have your details up at the end of the show so people can book a shadow coaching session with you.
Thank you.